For this video, we use all of the tools, techniques, grouping, and components to create a simple house. After moving Frank slowly off of the midpoint, let's press our top-down view from the view bar so we can see directly over our drawing. Using our pencil tool from the midpoint, we're going to come up for a value of 25 feet. Across the back, we'll move over for 30 feet. Down another 20. Over for 15. And we'll infer the last part so that the base of our house will look like this. Now let's zoom in so that our drawing is nice and large in our picture. We're going to use our offset tool, but we're going to offset to the outside of our drawing, not to the inside. The offset distance is going to be 6 inches, and I'll just double check with my tape measure tool that from end to end is now going to be 31 feet as opposed to 30 because we now have 6 inches on either side. Rotating my drawing around, I'm going to take the walls, which I've created, click twice inside so that only the outer edges turn blue, and I'm going to come up for a distance of 10 feet. This will be the basis for our outer walls, which will be grouped eventually, but not just yet. Before we group it, what we want to do is we want to cut out the openings so that we can see, so we can place our doors and windows in, and we'll be able to see through them. Starting with the front edge of the house, I'm going to take my tape measure tool so I can find the midpoint. Now, using my square tool, I'm going to create a square and I'm going to draw it up here in this area. I don't want to draw it so that it touches the bottom line. If it touches the bottom line, I can't move it up and off. I can only move it left to right. So if I Control Z that and get my tool, I'm going to make a door opening, which a standard side opening is 36 inches by 6 feet 8 inches. Now you can see that it came out the wrong way. So instead of entering at 36 by 6.8, I'm going to do that backwards the other way. And I'm going to enter at 6 feet 8 inches, comma, 36 inches, and enter. With this opening, I'll now double click it, making sure I have my midpoint and dragging it directly to the bottom edge of the house and the dimension line that I just made. Now, in order to get a hole through the house, we can't just simply click on the face and delete it, because now there are 2 sides to the wall, and that would only delete one. Control Z. Instead, I have to use my push-pull tool and cut the opening out. So if I grab my push-pull tool, the easiest way to do this is to click once and to start moving back and enter a distance of 6 inches. Because the walls are only 6 inches thick, the push-pull will move to the back and will automatically cut out the proper space. Other ways to do this would be to infer. So I could click, move back. I could infer by pressing or touching the back edge and pressing enter. Or from the front, which is probably a little more difficult, if I click and slowly move in until my face is blue and white like that, and I will get the opening required to build the next step of my drawing. Now, using some guidelines, I'm going to cut out the rest of the openings for my front of my house. I'm going to carefully get a dimension tool and move straight down until I touch the top edge of the door, which will be the height of the windows, because you want to keep the windows and the door at the same height. Let's now take our dimension tool and, starting from the left edge, move over until you find the midpoint of the door. If you do not find the midpoint initially, escape off the tool and try from the other edge until you get the cyan dot at the bottom marking the midpoint. I'll do the same thing over here. There you can see I don't have the dot just yet. So I'll escape out and try it from a different size until I get it. Now we have cross sections to drop our windows in. We'll start with a window with our rectangle tool. And I'll pull it down to about the size I want this window to be. And for this window, I'm going to make it 3.5 feet by 2.5 feet. It's a nice size window. I'm going to take it. I'm going to find my midpoint. And I'm going to drag it to the intersection of those two lines. Now we're centered in the middle of the door and the wall, as well as the height of the door. Snapping the midpoint again, I'm going to press Control, move, and keep that same window over to this side. Now we'll push-pull the openings using our push-pull tool, which should have remembered the distance of the last opening, so we should just be able to double-click in both instances and automatically cut out the lines we need. Now let's move to our large front area for a picture window, which is a little bit bigger than other windows. Now I want to keep the height the same, so I'm going to actually delete these guidelines using my eraser tool to make it a little easier to see. Now using my tape measure tool, I'm going to click and come down and snap to the top of the windows here, and then use another guideline and snap to the previous one, so now I have a distance right across the top. Let me delete those two as well now, so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. Let's find our midpoint, and we can begin to cut the hole for our opening. Our windows over here were 3.5 tall and 2.5 wide. We're going to put a window in the middle, so let's make that window 4 feet wide by 3.5 feet tall. So again, let's move it into position. And now create 2 additional windows to the right and to the left for a distance of 2.5 feet by 3.5 feet. Make sure you're entering the numbers in the correct order using feet and inches, as I just didn't do there. So I'll Control Z it, and I'll enter it the opposite way, which is 3.5 feet by 2.5 feet. And with 2 clicks to select just this one, I'm going to execute another copy move and bring it over to the side. Let's use our push-pull tool and cut out our openings. Notice that this one didn't go all the way through. We're going to have to go in manually with our eraser tool and just erase that line and that line there. We also have these little marks where the old windows were. Let's use our rectangle tool, our tape measure tool, from the front edge and just snap to each line so we know where they end. At this point, we should have our 4 openings cut out, and let's go ahead and save our work. With the front done, let's turn our attention to the left side of the house. We're going to create an opening here for a window, which, if you have time, you will build custom down the road. Let's keep our same heights, so I can come down from the top here, down from the top here, and that will mark the area of my drawing where my window will be centered. For this particular drawing, for this particular window I should say, let's make it nice and big, and we'll use a distance of 7 feet by 4 feet. So 7 feet long, comma, 4 feet tall. Center the window again, and cut it out with your push-pull tool. And let's rotate around towards the back. However, looking at the inside of our drawing, you can see now all but 2 of our walls have cutouts on them. We're going to leave these two walls blank for now and focus on creating doors and windows for inside of the drawing. We can clean up this one guideline for now and leave these two over here as we will use them in a moment. At this point, we will now begin to incorporate grouping and components into our drawing. It's important that you understand why we are using grouping and components and how they work, as later on it will make it much easier to work with the model. Remember, when something is grouped, it is locked together so it cannot be changed. This outer walls are not grouped, and therefore, if I go to make any type of change to them, I can without a problem. However, these walls are set up very specifically for what we want to do. So instead of leaving them unlocked, I'm going to triple click, then right click, and make this entire outer wall section one group, which can no longer be changed unless you double click and go into edit mode. Remember, edit mode will have the lines around the outside and it will allow you to change things. This will be important later on down the road, as we will be making changes to the wall after we have grouped it together. Alright, we're going to start by drawing a door on top of the group. Make sure you're not in the group in edit mode. This is going to go on top of the group. We'll start by simply covering the face that's already there. And now, using our select tool, we'll select the three edges of the outside of the door and pull them out for 4 inches. At this point, let's make the door a component. So, very carefully, if you click on it, you'll notice that the door itself doesn't completely select. This is because we created the offset around, it's actually not connected along the bottom. So let's zoom in tight across the bottom and move our pencil across. You'll notice now the entire door will highlight. With it highlighted, let's right click and make it a component. You can name the component door. You should now notice that the door acts like a component and can be moved in one shot separately from the opening it's in. Also remember that in order to edit this particular door, we have to go into edit mode of the component. So I will double click on the component and I will pull the outer frame for a distance of 4 inches. I will then carefully move the door out for a total of 2 inches. Remember, you have to be in edit mode of your component. If you do not see those lines around there, you cannot change it. Let's make one small feature by finding our midpoint of our door. And we'll use the top part here. Now be careful when you get your tape measure tool, you're not selecting from the front edge but the back edge. So really get used to zooming in, using your orbit tool, and getting the best view possible. I'm going to come down here about 1 foot and I'm going to make myself a simple window. The window will be nothing more than a rectangle, slightly skinny, more skinny than it is long, and I'm going to get this 2 feet by 6 inches. Just try that again. 2 feet, 6 inches, and then let's move it into position here. Well, we have the door almost completed. Let's take a doorknob, which is just a small circle, and just approximately at this point, let's zoom in and make a circle, and let's get this circle of a distance of 1.5 inches. I'm going to then take my doorknob and I'm going to color it first, and you'll see the reason why we color it. I'm going to make it a gold color. I'm going to color it first. The reason why I color it first is now when I go to push-pull the simple doorknob, all the sides of the doorknob will be colored at the same time. So there's a simple doorknob. Let's color the glass under our translucent menu. You should be able to see through the house. And finally, the door, a type of deep burgundy color. Now with our color palette still out, we have to color the edges of the door. I'm going to pick a brown color to do so. And you'll notice that there are a bunch of different edges I have to color. So using your orbit tool and your zoom tool, you have to get in nice and close and click on each of the faces that need to be colored. There's an easy way to color all these sides in one shot, which we'll show you as we go through making the window. If you click out of the component, you should now have clicking on the walls one group and clicking on the door as a component. If you do not have these two very distinct features, stop now. Let's go back and figure out what you did wrong. If you were good, we're going to move over and we're going to draw our windows. We don't need our guideline here right now anymore, but you'll notice I can't delete the guideline. Why can't I? Well, very simply because that guideline was drawn in the wall grouping. So if I want to get rid of it, I must activate edit mode in the wall grouping, and now I'll be able to go back and to delete the guides. Actually, now that I look at it, the guides are inside of the wall group, are inside of the door grouping, so I have to open up the door and then they'll highlight blue and then they can be deleted. Now let's turn our attention to the windows. I'm going to draw my first window just like this. I'm going to use my offset tool, offsetting on the outside. Now I want it to be even with the door, but if I don't remember what I did for the door, what offset was, I can just take my tool over and click the top edge and it will give me the same offset that it did for the door. Let's divide our window in half. And at this point, let's make it a component. With my select tool, I'll carefully drag around the edges. Be sure that you only select the edges and lines that are around the tool. You don't want to select anything else, as then those lines will be in that grouping as well. I'm going to select just the window. I'm going to make it a component and name it window. Now the reason why it's going to be a component is because I'm going to use it for not only this opening, but this opening as well. So I'm going to grab the inside top edge, press Control, move over, and snap it to the interior edge. You'll also notice that it's perfectly in line because there's a red dotted line that goes down the axis. Now it doesn't matter which one of the windows we edit, they will both change. Remember, to change the window now, you have to go back into edit mode and begin to edit it. Now we actually want to divide this into 3 panes, but we can only get the midpoint right there. So if you remember correctly, we can select this top edge, and then with the line selected, carefully click on the divide tool by right-clicking, and now you can see we have a total of 3 line segments. 4 dots, but 3 line segments. The line segments are each in between the red dots. So if I press 3, or if you do not see it in the bottom right-hand window, and press Enter, I've now divided this line into 3 segments. And you can see those segments by snapping. Now remember, the cyan colors are the midpoint, so you want to get the green to go down and down once again. Let's take the offset tool and carefully in each side create ourselves an offset. We're going to use an offset distance of 1.5 inches. Notice that over here this component has changed as well. Remember that the offset tool remembers the last unit of measure, so if we double click on the remaining window panes, they will all become the same value. Let's delete the middle lines giving us 3 window panes. Now, before we push pull, remember how we said that after we move something, we have to color a bunch of the lines, or all of the faces. Instead, what we can do is, before we push pull them, we can use our color palette. So instead of coloring each face, we only have to do one. So let's take the exterior trim color of wood. If you don't remember what it was, you can use this little eyedropper tool and click over a sample of that color. For instance, even if this color was red in your materials window, clicking on the eyedropper tool will change the color to the outer edge, and we can then color it what we want. Now let's push pull, and we're going to come the same distance that we did for the door. So we'll click on the door. You'll notice that all of the edges have indeed turned. Now let's do the same thing with the interior panes, and let's color them the same burgundy color that we did the door. Zoom in nice and close so that it's easier to do. Now we're going to push pull out, and we're going to bring this distance out for 1.5 inches. Now you may notice there's some extra lines in here which we can delete. Just be very careful. Zoom in nice and tight. Delete each one. And the last step will be to use our translucent color for the glass, coloring each pane, allowing us to see through. If done properly, both windows are made. They're both the exact same color, and they're all lined across the top. You now have one grouping for the walls, a component, a copy of a component, and the door component. Make sure to save your work. We're now going to use the component windows we've already created and shrink them down so they fit into the spots over here. Making sure you're outside the group, get your copy move tool and grab the top right corner and drag it over to the top right corner of the window. Now you'll notice we're way too far over. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our scale tool, and if we click on it with our scale tool, we can grab a handle, in this case the back left, and move it over until it snaps to the line we've just created. Let's do the same thing underneath by carefully orbiting around, clicking, moving up until you feel the snap into position again. We know that this is now the right size for not only this window, but for this window over here. So now we don't have to rescale it, we just have to copy it and move it. Making sure you're nice and close and you're getting the top edge, press Control, make sure you have your component selected, Control, and drop it into position. And now we'll draw the very simple window that's going to be in between these two. So we'll take our rectangle tool to the back edge. We'll use our offset tool and offset by inferring to the window here by simply moving over. And now, if you remember correctly, so we do it nice and fast, let's color the window using our eyedropper to get the brown color on the outside of the window. We will push pull it to the edge, make our middle one translucent. Now, don't forget, since this was drawn individually, we're going to double click this and make this a group as well. We can get rid of these guidelines too by saying Edit, Delete Guides. Now, if we count our groups, count them along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 groups and components in this drawing. If you got this far and everything checks out, you can save your work. I'm going to hide my materials window, and I'm going to get an angle where I can see the top of the roof where we'll be drawing. Remember, the roof is not part of any other group. It will be its own group, so we want to make sure we do not, at any level or time, click inside of this group. And the easiest way to draw the roof is to zoom in nice and tight with your rectangle tool from corner to corner and from corner to corner. Now, using your select tool, select this one line and press delete. That will give us a nice top to our roof. Now, roofs have overhangs on certain edges of them, so we will use our offset tool to create this overhang. The offset tool will be used to the outside of the house at a distance of 1.5 feet. Now, we don't want this entire offset, so pay attention carefully as we will cut some of the lines off. Using my straight line tool, on the left edge, I'll come down here, and I'll come here along the green axis, and we'll cut those edges off. I will come to the other side and do the exact same thing to here. Careful, if you accidentally delete the wall grouping like that, press delete or undo. And the final one we're going to take out, missed that one, is this line here and this line here. Now double check carefully that your roof looks like this. You should have an overhang 1, 2, 3 separate spots. If you're not, Control Z back and figure out where you went wrong. From here, we can now begin to build the roof of our house. Roofs are fairly straightforward to build in a situation like this. We're going to find the midpoint of our front line and go up as high as we want the peak of the roof to be. We don't want this peak to be too high and look like a church, so we'll come down to about, say, here, and let's make this peak at 6 feet. Using my pencil tool, I'll collect edge to edge, deleting my center line. And now with my push tool, I'm going to orbit around to the back, and as I push pull, if I just push pull, you'll notice it gets stuck. So as you push pull, press the control key and snap to the very back edge, which will give you the front of the house with an overhang. We will do the same process over here. Now here I'm seeing the midpoint in my group. I'm going to come up, and you could actually, if you wanted to, infer the height at 6 feet. But since we already know it, just make sure your line is perfectly straight up at 6 feet, and do the same process to create the rest of the roof. Again, we'll push this over, and you can go over as far as you want, giving our roof intersecting points. Now, you'll see here how we have the two roofs come together, but there's not a line there to delineate the two spots. So if we want, we can simply double-click the entire roof, and then right-click it and intersects faces with models. And that will give us our eave lines, as you see there, which will give the roof a nice look to it. At this point, our roof is basically done, so we can triple-click it and group it together. If we're going to add no more features, it would look something like this. Save your work. Let's now add some additional features to our house. Let's first by selecting the roof, which is kind of in the way right now, so let's right click and let's hide the roof so we don't have to see it. On the inside, I want to take my tape measure tool and come halfway down this line, which should be at 10 foot because the wall is a distance of 20. Now moving back around to the outside, I'm going to make a rectangle that is 2 feet wide by 4 feet long. This will be the base of a chimney, so I'll select it, and I'll snap it to the outside of the house. Now before I can push pull up to see this height I want, I need to look at the roof again to make sure it's in the right position height wise. So I'll go to my edit menu and say unhide last. Using my select tool and my push pull tool, I'll move up to a distance just above the height of the house, and we'll call this an even 20 feet. It's a very simple chimney. And let's also go up top and create the opening. So I'll use a simple offset here of say 6 inches. And let's just pull this down, let's say 16 feet. So now we have our chimney, our roof, and our house. What should we do with the chimney next? We should double click it and make it a group. We now have each of the features of the basic house completed. All that's left to do now is to color it. Remember, when coloring, you have to select the group that you want to color prior to coloring it. If I take my bricks and I click on the entire group, the whole thing colors. Well, maybe I don't want that. If I wanted to just go face by face, I would open the group up and face by face color the house as I see fit. I actually do like the brick look, so I'm also going to make the chimney a brick, which is as a group. Let's make that. And now to the roof. Double click. I will go to my roofing. And we'll see what kind of roof looks best on this particular house. I like the dark look, so the last thing to do is color these two eaves, which would probably not be the roofing color. Probably something like a cladding to give it a little bit of contrast. And I'll make my way all the way around. We will now look at some advanced grouping techniques as well as layering, which will help to keep our models organized so further down the road when they get more complicated they will be easy to work with. Right now you have a roof group, you have a chimney, walls, and then you have the individual components that we made prior. Now in certain senses we're going to need to remove some of these so that we could see what's going on the inside of the house by hiding them, which is all well and good. We can hide both this and the chimney. However, that is not the easiest way to do so. I'm going to go to Edit, Unhide, and the first thing we're going to look at is our group. We have our outer walls grouped together, but the windows and the doors, which are technically part of the walls, move independently from the doors and windows. We don't necessarily want this because these can all be in one group themselves. So let's do this. Let's right click on the wall grouping and press explode. This will take off the group of the walls and leave our components still grouped. If we triple click the walls, hold the shift button, and carefully select each of the other windows components and group them, you'll notice they now all move in the same spot, which is ideal for our applications going forward. When the house is completely finished, we will end up grouping the entire thing together so that it is all one piece and cannot be separated. We're not going to do that right now, so all we want to do is explode the wall group and put each of the components into that particular group with the wall. Layers are another important aspect of SketchUp. If we go to our window tool and click on the layers toolbar, our layer comes up here. Layers are essentially different levels of which the drawing is on. You can see right now that layer 0 is the only layer we have. That means that each of the components that we've drawn so far are on layer 0. What we want to do is we want to move all of the components off of layer 0 and onto a layer that is specific to whatever feature of the house we're dealing with. Alright, to do so, let's go to the plus sign, which adds a layer. I'm going to name this layer Roof. Now you'll notice that the black dot is not next to the roof layer. That means that anything we draw right now Okay, will go on the active layer, which is layer 0 because it has the black dot to it. If we moved it to the roof layer, active, whatever we drew would be on the roof layer. How does this work? Well, let's go over to the roof, and if you notice up here, you have another layer toolbar. If we select the roof and hit our drop-down menu, we can move the roof to a separate layer. Now, if we need to get rid of the roof temporarily, we can press the checkbox next to visible, and the roof will disappear. I'm going to add another layer and call this layer walls, and I will select the walls and move it to the wall layer. It's important that you know what layer is where so that your drawing will be neat and organized. This is extremely important if only your groups are done correctly. If you do not have groups that are done properly, you will run into issues down the road. This is an advanced feature which we will use many times in the future. The last thing we want to do is we have our chimney, which we could add that layer or put it on the wall layer. I'm simply going to add it to a new layer by selecting it and moving it to the chimney. Now I can hide each individual piece of my drawing without having to worry about it going away for good. Now if I try to hide the visible layer, I get a warning. It says you cannot hide the current layer. That's because one layer must always be active and visible. If I chose the roof layer to be active and I pressed the visible key for layer 0, what would disappear? Well, it would be just Frank. So I'll keep all my layers visible, and I'll keep layer 0 active for now. Let's now add a lawn to our house by first starting and creating a new layer called lawn. Remember, when you create a new layer, it does not automatically become active. So if we want to draw on the lawn layer, as we do right now, we're going to click the circle and put the black dot in it to indicate that whatever we draw now will go on the active layer, which is the lawn. I'll back off and, using my tape measure tool, create a guideline that is 10 feet out from both the left and right side of the house. From the front of the house, I'll create another guideline that comes out for 20 feet. And the same thing off of the back. Now that I have my guidelines established, using my rectangle tool, I'll find the intersection point of the back two guidelines and the front and create a basic lawn. I also want to push-pull this lawn, and I'll go down for 2 inches, creating my lawn. Let's group the lawn together by triple clicking and making it a group. We will color it later with a grass-like texture, but for now we'll leave it as it is. I want to delete my guidelines. And lastly, let's move Frank to the lawn layer. As it is now, he's on the layer 0. So I'll select him and just move him up to the lawn layer. Now every single object is on a layer except for layer 0, which is empty. Because there's nothing on that, it'll allow us to hide every aspect of our drawing one by one.